Have you ever noticed how some people can make you feel completely powerless without saying a single word? The way they leave your message unread, make you wait for hours, days even. And somehow, you're the one who ends up anxious, desperate for a response. It's a strange game, isn't it? That uncomfortable silence that makes you second-guess everything. What if I told you that in that moment, when you finally break and send that follow-up text, when your emotions take over and you react, you've just handed over complete control of the interaction to them. You've shown your cards, revealed your weaknesses, and given someone else the blueprint to your mind. Has this ever happened to you? That moment when you realize someone knows exactly which buttons to push to make you angry, sad, or desperate for their approval. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. The truth is, we live in a world where emotional manipulation has become an invisible art form. Most people don't even realize they're being controlled because it's happening beneath the surface, in the subtle dynamics of every interaction. It's not about physical dominance anymore. It's about who can maintain emotional control while disrupting yours. Machiavelli once said, "He who controls your emotions controls your fate." And that's exactly what most people fail to see. The world doesn't destroy you with force. It destroys you with emotional pressure. Every time you explode in anger, sink into guilt, or spiral into sadness because of someone else's actions, you're surrendering your power. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might completely transform how you navigate every relationship in your life. The 7 dark truths I'm about to share aren't taught in schools or discussed in polite conversation. They reveal the hidden architecture of human interaction, the unspoken rules that determine who leads and who follows. The first of these truths is perhaps the most profound, the power of emotional control. Have you ever noticed how the calmest person in any conflict inevitably emerges as the victor? How the one who doesn't flinch, who doesn't rush to explain themselves, who maintains composure while everyone else loses theirs, somehow always ends up with the upper hand? That's not coincidence. It's strategy. The most emotionally dangerous people aren't those who shout the loudest or make the biggest scenes. They're the ones who remain unreadable, unpredictable, impossible to provoke. The ones whose silence creates more pressure than anyone else's words. The ones who can feel pain and still smile, receive an insult and remain quiet, face doubt and walk forward with absolute certainty. These are the people who truly terrify others, not because they're aggressive, but because they're untouchable. Because when your emotions belong only to you, when no external force can dictate how you feel or how you respond, you become the eye of the hurricane, calm while everything around you spins in chaos. And this is just the beginning of what it means to become emotionally dangerous. If these insights on emotional mastery resonated with you, hit the subscribe button. I dive deep into these psychological principles that most people never discuss, but that transform how you navigate every relationship in your life. The real power of emotional mastery isn't just about controlling your reactions. It's about becoming completely unpredictable. Think about it. When someone insults you and expects anger but receives only a calm smile, they're immediately disoriented. When they try to make you doubt yourself, but you continue forward with unwavering certainty, they're the ones who begin to question everything. This unpredictability creates a peculiar kind of psychological advantage that few people understand. Most people are desperately searching for a reaction, any reaction. They need to see that they've affected you somehow. That's the hidden truth behind most provocations. When you deny them this satisfaction, when you feel the pain but don't show it, when you hear the insult but don't defend yourself, you create a psychological void that terrifies them. Your silence becomes more powerful than any argument you could possibly make. There's a profound mindset shift that happens when you realize that wanting nothing is infinitely more powerful than wanting everything. Look around you. Most people are driven by insatiable desires for validation, understanding, acceptance, love, recognition. These desires become hooks that others can grab onto and pull. But what happens when you cut those hooks? What transformation occurs when you no longer need external validation to feel complete? You become emotionally sovereign. When you stop needing reactions from others, when their approval or disapproval no longer dictates your internal state, you gain the most valuable asset in human interaction, complete control over your own life. This journey toward emotional independence is what separates those who are perpetually manipulated from those who maintain their power in every situation. The most formidable people you'll ever meet aren't those with the most resources, connections, or even intelligence. They're the ones who remain calm when everyone else is panicking, who stay unreadable when others are desperately trying to figure them out, who maintain their unpredictability when others need certainty. These qualities create an aura around a person that others can sense but can't quite define. Once you reach this level of emotional mastery, where your reactions belong only to you, where your emotions serve your purposes rather than someone else's, you break free from being a puppet in other people's games. You begin making decisions from a place of clarity rather than reactivity. You see the manipulations for what they are, simply information rather than commands you must obey. Think of it as developing an emotional force field. The same words, situations, and provocations that once sent you spiraling now bounce off this invisible barrier, unable to penetrate your inner world without your permission. This isn't about becoming cold or detached. It's about choosing when, how, and to what degree you'll engage emotionally with the world around you. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because there's a critical distinction between controlling your emotions and suppressing them. The emotionally dangerous person isn't emotionless. They're simply selective about what emotions they display and when they display them. They understand the revelations that come with emotional intelligence, the hidden leverage that exists in every human interaction. Take a moment right now and write in the comments, "I control my reactions, not the other way around." If you've ever experienced the power of maintaining composure when someone was trying to provoke you, this brings us to the second dark truth, one that's particularly insidious because it hides in plain sight. Manipulation rarely announces itself. It doesn't arrive with warning signs or obvious red flags. Instead, it comes dressed as something we all crave: genuine connection, care, and concern. That's what makes it so effective. Most people don't realize they're being controlled because it never looks like control. It looks like someone who's deeply interested in your well-being, someone who's loyal to a fault, someone who only wants what's best for you. But behind this facade of care lies something much more calculated: a strategy. Think about the people in your life who always seem to make you feel slightly off balance, slightly guilty, or slightly indebted. These aren't random interactions. There's a pattern beneath the surface, a hidden architecture to these relationships that serves someone else's agenda, not yours. The manipulator's journey begins with a simple process: data collection. They study you like a scientist studies a fascinating specimen. Every reaction, every vulnerability, every emotional trigger becomes valuable information. They're taking notes on what makes you angry, what makes you insecure, what makes you feel special. They observe which criticisms cut deepest and which compliments make you drop your guard. This emotional intelligence gathering isn't random. It's methodical and purposeful. And then one day, often when you least expect it, they deploy this knowledge. They know exactly which buttons to push to make you question your own reality, doubt your instincts, or compromise your boundaries. The truly masterful manipulator doesn't need to demand power. They make you hand it over willingly, believing it was your idea all along. The most effective tool in their arsenal is guilt, the silent assassin of healthy boundaries. Have you noticed how certain people in your life seem particularly skilled at making you feel bad about perfectly reasonable decisions? Phrases like, "I thought you were different," or "you've really changed," might sound like simple observations, but they're actually sophisticated traps. They're designed to make you second-guess your strength, to make you question your growth, to pull you back into patterns of behavior that serve them, not you. These guilt trips aren't accidental. They're precision instruments. When someone says, "After all I've done for you," they're not really reminding you of their generosity. They're activating your sense of obligation to override your independence. When they say, "I guess I just care too much," they're not admitting a flaw. They're reframing their controlling behavior as virtue while making you feel heartless for resisting it. Take ownership of your emotional sovereignty by subscribing to this channel. Each new video builds on these fundamental truths, giving you practical tools to become the most emotionally dangerous person in any room. Behind the scenes, what's really happening is a battle for psychological territory. The manipulator isn't interested in mutual growth or genuine connection. They're interested in compliance. They fear your independence more than your anger. They dread your clarity more than your confusion. That's why they work so hard to cloud your judgment and destabilize your confidence. The real revelation comes when you understand that manipulators don't randomly target anyone. They're attracted to people with specific qualities: empathy, openness, a desire to please, and a tendency to second-guess themselves. These aren't weaknesses, they're beautiful human traits that manipulators have learned to exploit. Write in the comments, "I recognize the patterns now," if you've ever experienced that moment of clarity when you suddenly saw manipulation for what it really was. What's particularly fascinating about manipulators is what they truly fear. And it's not what most people think. Many believe that standing up to manipulators means confronting them with anger or outrage. But here's the surprising insight. Manipulators actually prefer your anger over your calm. When you're angry, you're predictable. Your emotions are running the show, not your rational mind. And anything predictable can be controlled. What truly terrifies a manipulator is your calm, your centered, grounded, unshakable presence. Your ability to observe their tactics without being triggered by them. This is why they'll do absolutely anything to disrupt your emotional equilibrium, provoke you, insult you, guilt you, gaslight you, anything to knock you off balance. Because in that space of emotional chaos, they regain control. They understand intuitively what few others grasp. Emotion clouds judgment, and clouded judgment leads to manipulated decisions. This revelation transforms how you approach these interactions. Instead of trying to win arguments or prove points, you simply need to maintain your emotional sovereignty. The moment you remain calm in the face of their provocations is the moment you become truly dangerous to their agenda. Have you ever noticed how certain relationships leave you feeling consistently drained rather than energized? This isn't coincidence. It's a signature of manipulation. Energy vampirism isn't just a metaphor. It's an accurate description of what's happening in these dynamics. These individuals aren't just communicating with you. They're feeding off your emotional reactions like energy. Your distress, confusion, anger, or anxiety becomes fuel for their sense of power and control. The pattern is unmistakable once you learn to recognize it. After interactions with them, you feel heavy, exhausted, somehow less than you were before. You might not be able to pinpoint exactly what happened, but something inside you knows that an exchange of energy occurred, and not in your favor. This consistent drainage is one of the most reliable indicators that you're dealing with someone who's manipulating rather than connecting. Perhaps the most powerful tool in your arsenal against manipulation is something surprisingly simple: silence. Not the passive-aggressive silence used to punish, but the calm, observant silence that comes from a place of strength. Emotional manipulators hate this kind of silence because it forces them to face themselves. Your silence acts as a mirror, reflecting their tactics back to them. And that reflection is something they simply cannot stand. When you refuse to engage, when you don't take the bait, when you observe rather than react, you create a vacuum that the manipulator desperately needs to fill. They'll escalate their tactics, become increasingly transparent in their attempts to provoke you, and ultimately reveal themselves more clearly than any confrontation ever could. Your silence becomes a form of truth-telling more powerful than words. This journey toward recognizing manipulation isn't just about self-protection. It's about reclaiming your authentic self. Many who've been subjected to long-term manipulation describe the awakening process as finding parts of themselves they didn't even realize were missing. There's a profound sense of coming home to yourself when you finally see the invisible strings that were pulling at your emotions and decisions. Drop in the comments, "I choose calm over reaction," if you're committed to maintaining your emotional equilibrium even when others try to destabilize it. The most liberating revelation in this entire journey comes when you truly grasp this. Awareness alone is enough to break the spell of manipulation. It's almost magical how it works. Once you identify the patterns, once you recognize the tactics for what they are, the power dynamics fundamentally shift. What worked in the dark cannot survive in the light of your consciousness. Think about it this way. Manipulation operates like a sophisticated magic trick. When you don't understand how it works, you're amazed, maybe even a bit intimidated, but the moment someone explains the mechanism behind the illusion, you can never see it the same way again. That's what happens when you become aware of manipulation tactics. You begin to see through every act, every guilt trip, every silent treatment. Their once effective tools suddenly become transparent and predictable. This transformation is profound. The manipulator hasn't changed, but your perception has. The same words that once cut deep now appear as obvious attempts to control. The same guilt trips that once sent you spiraling now seem almost laughably transparent. You've developed a kind of emotional X-ray vision that allows you to see beneath the surface to the true intentions behind the behavior. And this leads us to another critical truth, one that Machiavelli understood centuries ago, yet most people still struggle to accept. In strategic interactions, unbridled emotion is weakness. This isn't about denying your humanity or becoming cold. It's about understanding that while feeling deeply makes us human, allowing those feelings to dictate our choices makes us manipulable. Every time your mood controls your decisions, every time your reactions override your intentions, you hand power to anyone watching. Your emotions become levers others can pull to influence your behavior. Think about how many significant decisions in your life were made from an emotional state rather than a place of clarity. How many of those decisions do you now regret? This revelation isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about mastering them. It's about creating space between what you feel and how you respond. In that space lies your freedom, your power, and your ability to act with intention rather than reaction. What Machiavelli observed about rulers applies equally to our everyday interactions. He noted that people judge from appearances more than reality. They respond to what they see rather than what is. This insight is invaluable in understanding human dynamics. People will take advantage of your visible emotions faster than they'll understand your actual intentions. When you display anger, people don't see the legitimate grievance behind it. They see only the anger itself and label you as out of control. When you show excessive enthusiasm, they don't appreciate your passion. They sense an opportunity to sell you something while your guard is down. When you exhibit fear, they don't empathize with your concerns. They identify a weakness they can potentially exploit. This isn't cynicism, it's strategic awareness. Behind the scenes of every human interaction, these calculations are happening, often unconsciously. The person who understands this reality isn't controlled by it. They navigate it skillfully. Write in the comments, emotions are tools, not masters, if you're committed to mastering your emotional responses rather than being mastered by them. What few people realize is that every visible reaction you display becomes valuable information that others can leverage against you. Your emotional transparency, which society often celebrates as authenticity, actually creates a detailed roadmap for others to exploit. Think about what happens when you visibly react to an insult. You've just confirmed exactly what bothers you, ensuring it will be used again. When you desperately seek someone's approval, you reveal a psychological lever they can pull anytime they want something from you. When you fall too openly in love, you expose exactly how much power that person holds over your emotional state. This insight isn't about becoming secretive or paranoid. It's about understanding the hidden economy of information that exists in every human interaction. Your reactions are data. Your triggers are intelligence. Your visible emotions are strategic information. In a world that encourages constant emotional sharing and performative vulnerability, this reality remains largely unacknowledged. Consider how differently you might behave if you truly internalized this perspective. You might think twice before posting that angry rant online, before sending that emotionally charged text, before letting someone see exactly how much their words affected you. Not because you're hiding, but because you're being strategically selective about the information you provide to others about your internal landscape. This brings us to a counterintuitive revelation that challenges much of modern psychological advice. True power lies not in emotional expression, but in emotional restraint. We're constantly told to express ourselves, to let it all out, to be authentic with our feelings. Yet if you observe the truly influential people in any setting, they're rarely the most emotionally expressive. They're not the ones having public meltdowns or passionate outbursts. The strongest people in any room are those who maintain emotional sovereignty, who experience feelings deeply but don't allow those feelings to dictate their actions or decisions. They understand on a fundamental level that reaction is surrender. The moment you react impulsively is the moment you hand over control of the interaction to someone else. You become predictable, manipulable, and strategically disadvantaged. This mindset shift transforms how you navigate every relationship in your life. Instead of reacting to provocations, you respond strategically. Instead of being driven by emotional impulses, you act from a place of calm intention. This isn't about suppressing your humanity. It's about channeling it with purpose and direction. Now, I want to explore something that feels almost radical in our hyper-connected, oversharing culture, the strategic power of silence. In a world drowning in noise where everyone feels compelled to broadcast their thoughts, feelings, and opinions constantly, silence has become an increasingly rare and therefore increasingly powerful force. When everyone around you is talking, your deliberate silence immediately sets you apart. It creates an aura of mystery that people can't help but notice. There's something magnetic about the person who doesn't feel compelled to fill every silence, who doesn't overshare, who seems comfortable in the quiet. Their restraint creates a vacuum that others feel almost desperate to fill, often by revealing far more than they intended. What's fascinating is how people respond to your silence. In the absence of your words, they project their own meanings, fears, and interpretations onto your quietness. Your silence becomes a mirror, reflecting their own psychological state back to them. This gives you an extraordinary informational advantage while revealing nothing about your own position or intentions. Drop in the comments, "Silence is my secret weapon," if you've ever experienced the power of strategically choosing not to speak when everyone expected you to react. Every word you speak is a piece of data you're handing over to whoever is listening. Think about that for a moment. When you explain yourself excessively, when you over-communicate, when you feel compelled to fill silences, you're not just making conversation. You're providing detailed intelligence about your thoughts, fears, insecurities, and desires. You're essentially handing someone a psychological dossier they can use to anticipate your moves, or, in some cases, manipulate your decisions. This revelation transforms how you approach conversations once you truly internalize it. The less you reveal, the less ammunition others have. This isn't about becoming secretive or withholding. It's about being strategically selective with your words. It's understanding that not every thought needs to be expressed, not every emotion needs to be announced, not every position needs to be declared. Nowhere is this principle more powerful than in negotiations. Whether you're negotiating a salary, a relationship boundary, or simply who's going to do the dishes tonight. One of the most transformative techniques in any negotiation is what I call the strategic pause, the deliberate silence after you've made your point or your request. Most people have never developed the discipline for this seemingly simple act. What happens in that silence is fascinating. It creates a psychological pressure that most people simply cannot handle. They rush to fill the void, often with concessions, additional information, or by weakening their position. They'll talk themselves down from their initial offer. They'll reveal their bottom line without you having to ask. They'll show their hand while you've revealed nothing, all because you created a space and had the discipline not to fill it. Behind the scenes of every negotiation is this hidden battle of nerves. Not about who can be more aggressive, but about who can be more comfortable with silence. The one who masters this skill rarely loses. This principle extends beyond formal negotiations into everyday conflicts and provocations. When someone tries to bait you into an emotional reaction, whether through an insult, an accusation, or a challenge, your silence maintains your position of power. The moment you jump to defend yourself, to explain, to counterattack, you've revealed something valuable. That their words matter to you, that they've successfully gotten under your skin. The mindset shift here is profound. The person who speaks first in a conflict often loses their edge by revealing their emotional investment. Their words betray their triggers, their insecurities, their need for approval or vindication. Meanwhile, the person who remains silent gives away nothing while gathering valuable information about the other's psychological state. Think about how often you've said something in the heat of the moment and later regretted it. Now imagine transforming those moments by simply choosing silence instead. Not a resentful or passive-aggressive silence, but a calm, centered, deliberate one. This single change in behavior can radically alter the dynamics of your most challenging relationships. The decision to remain silent, when provoked, isn't weakness, it's strategy. It's understanding that words, once spoken, cannot be taken back. They become weapons in someone else's arsenal. Your silence, on the other hand, remains yours alone, impenetrable, mysterious, and ultimately more powerful than any verbal response could be. Write in the comments, "My silence is deliberate," if you're ready to transform your approach to provocations by choosing strategic silence over reactive speech. There's another dimension to silence that's rarely discussed, the way excessive explanation actually diminishes your presence and authority. Have you noticed how the people who constantly explain themselves, who feel compelled to justify every decision or preference, somehow seem less substantial than those who simply act with quiet confidence? This isn't coincidence. Words, when overused, actually dilute your mystery and presence. Think about the people you most respect. Chances are they don't over-explain. They don't feel the need to justify their choices. They don't offer lengthy defenses when questioned. They state their position clearly and then remain comfortable in the silence that follows. This restraint creates a gravitational pull that words alone never could. Their silence speaks of self-assurance, of inner certainty that requires no external validation. This revelation completely transforms how you present yourself to the world. When you stop over-explaining, when you resist the urge to fill every silence with justification, your presence becomes immediately more powerful. You appear more confident, more deliberate, more certain, not because you've changed your behavior, but because you've changed what you don't do. Now, I want to explore something deeply personal yet universal, something that operates beneath the surface of all our interactions but rarely gets acknowledged. Every single one of us carries emotional triggers, those invisible buttons that, when pushed, can make us react in ways that are completely out of proportion to the actual situation. These emotional vulnerabilities are like hidden levers that others can pull to make you behave predictably, often against your own interests. Think of the person who can't stand being ignored, who sends multiple messages when the first one isn't answered immediately, or the one who explodes at the slightest perception of disrespect, or the one who crumbles at any hint of rejection. These aren't random reactions, they're predictable responses to specific triggers, and anything predictable can be exploited. The journey to becoming emotionally dangerous requires an unflinching inventory of these triggers. What words can someone say that immediately put you on the defensive? What situations reliably make you anxious or insecure? What types of criticism cut deeper than others? These questions demand raw honesty, because the triggers you refuse to acknowledge are the ones that will be used against you most effectively. This path towards self-knowledge isn't comfortable. It requires confronting wounded parts of yourself, acknowledging insecurities you'd rather ignore, and taking responsibility for reactions you've always blamed on others. But this uncomfortable excavation is the foundation of true emotional power. Awareness is the essential first step. You must be able to recognize exactly what words, actions, or situations cause you to lose emotional control before you can develop strategies to neutralize their effect. This awareness creates a crucial gap between stimulus and response, a moment of choice where previously there was only automatic reaction. Think about the last time someone pushed your buttons and you reacted in a way you later regretted. Now, imagine that same scenario, but with one critical difference. You recognize in real time what's happening. You see the trigger being pushed. You feel the emotional surge beginning. But instead of being carried away by it, you observe it with a new level of consciousness. Type in the comments, "I'm mapping my triggers," if you're ready to begin this journey of self-discovery and emotional mastery. This awareness creates the foundation for perhaps the most powerful technique in emotional mastery: the strategic pause. When you feel yourself being triggered, when that familiar surge of emotion begins to rise, force yourself to pause for at least 5 seconds before responding. This isn't easy. Every instinct will push you to react immediately, to defend, to counterattack. But in this small gap, just 5 seconds, lies a profound transformation. During this pause, something remarkable happens. The automatic connection between trigger and response begins to weaken. The neural pathway that has been reinforced over years of reactivity starts to reconfigure itself. You create space for choice where previously there was only compulsion. It's as if you're stepping outside the emotional current that usually carries you away, observing it from the riverbank, rather than being swept along. This simple practice, pausing when triggered, may seem trivial, but its impact on your life can be revolutionary. Think about how many relationships have been damaged by words spoken in the heat of the moment, how many opportunities have been lost to impulsive reactions, how many regrets have been born from responses you couldn't take back. Now imagine rewriting that story with the power of the pause. The next evolution in this journey is moving from pause to strategy, from simply not reacting to actively choosing a response that serves your interests. This is where true emotional intelligence manifests. Instead of reacting emotionally when triggered, you develop calculated responses that advance your goals while maintaining your composure. This mindset shift transforms provocations from threats into opportunities. The very moments that once derailed you become chances to demonstrate mastery. When someone tries to make you angry, your calm response communicates something powerful, not just to them, but to yourself. It says, I decide how I respond, not you, not my triggers, me. Behind the scenes of this transformation is a profound revolution in how you view challenging interactions. You begin to see provocations not as attacks to be defended against, but as tests to be passed, as opportunities to strengthen your emotional sovereignty. The person who once could push your buttons now unwittingly helps you build your power. Now I want to share something that might initially sound counterintuitive, but represents a breakthrough in managing your emotional triggers: controlled exposure. Much like building physical immunity requires exposure to small doses of a pathogen, building emotional immunity requires deliberate exposure to your triggers in manageable amounts. This practice of trigger desensitization is powerful but requires precision. You deliberately expose yourself to the words, situations, or criticisms that typically trigger you, but in carefully controlled doses while maintaining emotional equilibrium. Over time, this gradual exposure reduces the power these triggers hold over you. Their emotional charge begins to dissipate. Think of it as emotional weight training. Just as you wouldn't start with the heaviest weights in the gym, you begin with triggers that produce mild discomfort rather than overwhelming reaction. As your emotional muscles strengthen, you gradually increase the intensity. Each successful instance of maintaining control rewires your brain's response pattern. What's happening beneath the surface during this practice is fascinating. Your nervous system is learning that these triggers don't represent actual threats, that you can experience them without being overwhelmed. Your brain is creating new neural pathways that bypass the automatic fight or flight response that triggers once activated. Share in the comments, I'm practicing the power pause, if you've ever caught yourself before reacting and chose a different response to a trigger. This journey of emotional mastery ultimately leads to something far more comprehensive than just handling triggers well. It culminates in building what I call your mental fortress. This isn't just a metaphor, it's a practical framework for protecting your psychological sovereignty in a world constantly trying to breach your defenses. Think of your mind as sacred territory that requires protection. Every day, countless forces compete for access to this space. The news trying to trigger your outrage, social media designed to provoke envy or inadequacy, colleagues attempting to transfer their stress to you, manipulators working to implant their priorities into your thinking. Without deliberate protection, your mind becomes occupied territory, ruled by external forces rather than your own intentions. A mental fortress creates an inner sanctuary where you alone determine your thoughts, feelings, and focus. This doesn't mean disconnecting from the world or avoiding difficult conversations. It means creating a psychological architecture that filters what you allow to affect you. It means establishing an inner domain where you remain sovereign regardless of external chaos. The foundation of this fortress begins with clear, non-negotiable boundaries, your first line of defense. These boundaries aren't physical, but psychological. They determine what influences, people, and information you allow into your mental space and what you reject. They define what behavior you'll accept from others and what consequences follow when those lines are crossed. The revelation that transforms many people's journey is realizing that boundaries aren't requests, they're decisions. You don't need permission to establish them, and you don't need others to agree with them. You simply need to enforce them consistently. This enforcement often requires nothing more than the willingness to walk away from situations or relationships that repeatedly violate your mental sovereignty. As your boundaries become clearer, the next level of fortress building involves mastering selective attention. Your focus is your most valuable resource, yet most people surrender it without resistance to whatever screams loudest for their attention. The emotionally dangerous person understands that attention is a choice, not a reaction. Training yourself to focus only on what serves your goals and emotional stability creates impenetrable mental walls. This doesn't happen automatically. It requires deliberate practice, catching yourself when your attention drifts to provocations, distractions, or manipulations, and gently but firmly redirecting it to what matters. Think about how different your life would be if you could simply ignore attempts to upset you rather than engaging with them, not through suppression or denial, but through the enlightened choice to direct your mental energy elsewhere. This selective attention becomes a superpower in a world designed to hijack your focus at every turn. Behind the scenes of every interaction, there's an invisible competition for psychological territory. Who will influence whom? Whose priorities will dominate? Whose emotional state will set the tone? Most people enter these dynamics unconsciously, unaware of the territory they're surrendering with every reaction, every distraction, every emotional hijacking they allow. When you build your mental fortress, you enter these same interactions with a completely different mindset, aware of the psychological terrain, protective of your boundaries, and deliberate about what you allow to affect your internal state. This transformation changes everything. Write in the comments, "My mind is my fortress," if you're committed to protecting your mental space from manipulation and unnecessary drama. Like any worthwhile endeavor, building this mental fortress isn't a one-time project, but an ongoing practice of mental discipline. Most people approach emotional mastery with the same mindset they bring to crash diets: intense effort followed by complete abandonment. They maintain boundaries for a week, practice selective attention for a few days, then revert to their reactive patterns when tested. True mental fortitude develops just like physical strength, through consistent, deliberate practice over time. You wouldn't expect to transform your body with a single workout, yet many expect to transform their emotional responses with a single attempt at restraint. The revelation that changes everything is embracing this as a daily practice, rather than an occasional effort. These daily exercises in emotional control, focus, and resilience might seem small in the moment. Choosing not to engage with that provocative social media post. Maintaining composure when someone tests your boundaries. Redirecting your focus when you notice yourself spiraling into unproductive thoughts. Each instance might seem insignificant, but together they forge neural pathways that fundamentally alter your default responses. These small challenges aren't just practice, they're preparation. Every minor provocation you handle with composure prepares you for the greater tests that inevitably come. Every boundary you maintain in simple interactions strengthens your resolve for the moments when the pressure intensifies. You're essentially running emotional drills, preparing for the championship game of real-life challenges. Once established through consistent practice, your mental fortress becomes your ultimate advantage in every interaction. The transformation is remarkable to witness. Situations that once devastated you barely register. People who once could manipulate your emotions now find themselves unable to breach your defenses. Chaos that once infected your internal state now remains outside your walls while you maintain your center. This fortress doesn't just protect you, it empowers you. It makes you confident because you know your worth isn't determined by others' opinions. It makes you fearless because you understand that words and manipulations can only affect you if you allow them to. It makes you impossible to manipulate because you've sealed the emotional entrances that others once used to control you. Behind the scenes of this transformation is something even more profound, a fundamental shift in how you experience life. Most people live in reaction to external events, their emotional state constantly at the mercy of circumstances beyond their control. But the person with a well-established mental fortress experiences something entirely different, a sense of inner sovereignty regardless of external conditions. Now, I want to explore perhaps the most sobering realization on this journey. Emotional power, once attained, requires constant vigilance to maintain. This isn't a destination you reach once and then forget about. It's a territory you must continuously protect against those who will test your boundaries, challenge your composure, and attempt to breach your mental fortress. The world doesn't stop testing you once you develop emotional mastery. In fact, the tests often intensify. People who once could easily trigger you become frustrated when their usual tactics fail. They don't simply accept your new boundaries. They probe for weaknesses, increase the pressure, try new approaches to regain their former influence. Drop in the comments. Vigilance is my practice. If you've noticed how quickly your emotional mastery can slip without consistent reinforcement. Maintaining this emotional sovereignty requires mastering a skill few people even recognize exists. Observation without revealing vulnerability. There's an art to studying others, their patterns, intentions, and strategies, while giving away nothing about yourself. Think of it as one-way glass. You see out clearly, but they can't see in. This hidden skill develops with practice. You learn to notice the subtle timing of someone's provocations, how they tend to test you when you're tired or stressed. You recognize the emotional strategies they employ, which buttons they try to push, which insecurities they target. You detect patterns in their manipulation attempts that they themselves might not be conscious of. Yet while gathering this intelligence, you reveal nothing about your own psychological landscape. No reactions that confirm their tactics are working. No defensive responses that expose your sensitivities. No emotional outbursts that provide new data about what affects you. This creates a profound information asymmetry. You understand their playbook while yours remains a mystery. The revelation that transforms many people's journey is recognizing that restraint isn't weakness. It's strength in its purest form. Our culture often equates emotional expression with authenticity and power. We're told that holding back is repression, that restraint is somehow dishonest. But this perspective fundamentally misunderstands the nature of true strength. When someone attempts to provoke you and you resist the urge to respond immediately, to argue, defend, or justify yourself, you're not being passive. You're actively maintaining your position of power. Every withheld reaction strips influence from manipulators and preserves your internal authority. It's not the absence of action, it's the presence of control. Think about how differently you might approach provocations with this mindset. The insult that would have triggered an immediate defense becomes merely information about the person delivering it. The accusation that would have launched you into explanations is met with calm observation. The bait that would have pulled you into drama remains untouched. This isn't suppression, it's strategic choice. Behind the scenes of this transformation is a profound shift in how you experience emotions. You develop what might seem paradoxical at first. Emotional detachment. This doesn't mean becoming cold or unfeeling, quite the opposite. It means experiencing your emotions fully while maintaining enough distance to choose your response to them. This emotional detachment creates genuine inner sovereignty. When you live from this place of inner independence, no one can dictate your moods or decisions through emotional manipulation. External events may create feelings within you, but those feelings no longer automatically drive your behavior. You experience anger without becoming reactive, sadness without becoming helpless, fear without becoming paralyzed. The breakthrough moment comes when you realize that detachment allows you to feel more deeply, not less. When you're not afraid of your emotions controlling you, you can experience them without resistance. You can acknowledge pain without being overwhelmed by it. You can feel joy without clinging to it. You can experience the full spectrum of human emotion while maintaining your center. This level of emotional mastery doesn't just change how others see you. It fundamentally transforms how you experience your life. Every interaction becomes a choice rather than a compulsion. Every emotion becomes information rather than a command. Every provocation becomes an opportunity rather than a threat. Write in the comments, detached but not disconnected, if you're practicing feeling your emotions without being controlled by them. This discipline we're developing doesn't just protect you from triggers, it transforms them into opportunities for demonstrating mastery. Think about the profound shift that occurs when someone attempts to provoke you, expecting your usual reaction, but encounters your composed presence instead. What was designed to be your moment of weakness becomes your moment of power. When faced with situations specifically crafted to break your calm, the pointed criticism, the deliberate provocation, the calculated button-pushing, discipline ensures these moments become showcases of your control rather than evidence of your reactivity. The very triggers that once diminished you now elevate you. What a remarkable reversal of fortune. There's a particular kind of satisfaction that comes from this transformation, not from winning arguments or proving points, but from remaining untouched by attempts to manipulate your emotional state. When someone throws their best shot at destabilizing you and it simply doesn't land, the feeling isn't one of superiority or vindication. It's a quiet, profound satisfaction in your own sovereignty. Machiavelli once observed, "It is double pleasure to deceive the deceiver." This principle applies perfectly to emotional manipulation. When others attempt to control you through emotional triggers and fail, the satisfaction comes not from revenge, but from absolute self-control. They expect chaos, but you offer calm. They anticipate reaction, but you provide observation. They prepare for the person you used to be, but encounter the person you've become. Behind the scenes of this journey is a revolutionary insight that changes everything. True power isn't about controlling others, it's about mastering yourself. Most people spend their lives trying to influence, manipulate, or control those around them while remaining completely at the mercy of their own impulses, triggers, and emotional vulnerabilities. They seek external power while surrendering internal sovereignty. The emotionally dangerous person inverts this equation entirely. They understand that internal control supersedes external control in every meaningful way. Your reactions, your focus, your inner state, these must become non-negotiable regardless of external provocations. When you achieve this level of self-mastery, trying to control others loses its appeal entirely. You recognize it as the inferior form of power that it is. This revelation transforms your approach to every relationship in your life. Rather than trying to change others' behavior, you focus on maintaining your center regardless of their actions. Rather than attempting to manage others' perceptions, you commit to knowing your own truth. Rather than seeking power over others, you cultivate power within yourself. The ultimate outcome of this journey, the destination all these practices lead toward, is nothing less than an untouchable life. When your emotions truly belong only to you, when no external force can dictate your internal state, no one can control your life, you become formidable in the truest sense, not through aggression or domination, but through relentless self-mastery. This is what it means to become the storm everyone fears but never sees coming. Not because you're unpredictable in your actions, but because you're unshakable in your center. Not because you're volatile, but because you're immovable. Not because you're chaotic, but because you're sovereign. The world doesn't destroy people with force anymore. It destroys them with emotional pressure, with triggers, manipulations, and provocations designed to make them implode from within. The emotionally dangerous person has rendered themselves immune to this modern warfare. They've built a fortress that can't be breached, developed discipline that can't be broken, and claimed a sovereignty that can't be overthrown. Drop in the comments, "I am becoming untouchable," if you're committed to this path of emotional mastery as your foundation for an unshakable life. This journey toward emotional mastery isn't something you complete in a day or even a month. It's a path of continuous growth, of small daily victories that compound over time. If these dark truths have resonated with you, if you've found yourself nodding along, recognizing patterns in your own life, then you've already taken the first and most crucial step: awareness. The fact that you've stayed with me until this point tells me something important about you. You're not looking for quick fixes or surface-level solutions. You're willing to explore the deeper currents that shape human interaction, to examine uncomfortable truths that most people prefer to ignore. That curiosity, that commitment to understanding, it's rare. If you've found value in these insights, consider becoming part of this community by subscribing. Each week, we explore these hidden dimensions of human psychology and emotional intelligence, the unwritten rules that determine who leads and who follows in every interaction. This isn't about manipulating others, it's about ensuring you're never manipulated again. I'd love to know you made it to the end of this exploration. Drop a comment saying, "I choose emotional sovereignty so I can acknowledge your commitment to this path." Your engagement helps me understand which topics resonate most deeply and shapes the direction of future content. If this conversation has been valuable to you, a simple like helps others find these insights who might be searching for the same answers you were. It's a small gesture that expands the reach of these ideas to those who need them. There's a video right here that takes these concepts even further, exploring how to apply emotional mastery specifically in high-pressure professional environments. Click and continue with me there. We're just scratching the surface of what's possible when you truly own your emotional responses. Until next time, remember, true power always starts within.